Tariff Malaysia Free Trade Agreement Amendment Bill, and I must say, Mr. Speaker, this bill signifies another great achievement under this excellent national government. It was good to hear the Honourable Marion Street saying how important she thought this bill was and saying that she would be prepared to sacrifice some of her time if it meant it was going to be passed earlier. However, despite her saying that she would just take a 5-minute call, she couldn't help herself and went on for the full 10 minutes talking about the merits of this excellent bill under the national government. Mr. Speaker, I think it is appropriate to acknowledge Trade Ministers, both now and present, and I think, of course, of the Honourable Lockwood Smith, who was not acknowledged by Marion Street, Jim Sutton, Phil Goff, and, of course, the extremely hard-working and productive Honourable Tim Grosser. All of those members have worked extraordinarily hard for New Zealand under often hugely difficult time constraints day and night. But, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that this bill signifies the gathering pace of many free trade agreements that have gone on in recent times. And, of course, that includes, on the 1st of January, the agreement establishing the ASEAN, Australian and New Zealand free trade area entered into force. On March the 29th, the Minister of Trade, Tim Grosser, signed the Hong Kong-China Closer Economic Partnership Agreement, and, of course, the New Zealand Gulf Cooperation Council Free Trade Agreement negotiations have been concluded, and more recently, John Key has just returned from a very successful visit to the United States, further consolidating the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement, which began talks in Melbourne last month. And, of course, the government has secured approvals for free trade agreement negotiations to start with India, which again is another very significant achievement. And I do note that if all the free trade agreements come to fruition, it will mean direct and indirect agreements with the 4 most populous nations on earth, being China, India, the United States and Indonesia, and that represents almost half of the planet's population and much of the world's economic activity. And I must say, I thought the contribution from the Greens was a somewhat gloomy one, citing Dr. Lovelock, the British scientist who was suggesting an optimal world population of 1 billion when we have 6 billion, and almost inevitably the world's population will go up another 2 or 3 billion in the next 20 to 30 years. It is vital for New Zealand that we have greater opportunities for our food supply to go to these heavily populated countries. Undoubtedly, with time, there will be natural adjustments to population, but I think it absurd when we hear the Greens suggesting that the world population at 6 billion would optimally be at 1 billion. How are they possibly suggesting that we will reduce in this short period of time from 6 billion down to that much lower level? And talking about the perfect storm in 2030, of course, countries throughout the world, through such things and mechanisms as emissions trading systems, are taking the global warming issue very seriously. But, Mr. Speaker, this bill certainly signifies a great leap forward for New Zealand and a practical opportunity to increase our per capita income, which is absolutely central and vital to New Zealanders having the opportunity to get better health, welfare, social services and education services, which people such as the Green Party and most New Zealanders so badly wish. But I just want to comment on three last things, and they are these. Firstly, the environment part of this bill. The Malaysia-New Zealand Environmental Cooperation Agreement, negotiated in the context of the Malaysia FTA, establishes a set of shared trade and environmental principles to promote sound environmental practices and sustainable development. The agreement is Malaysia's first bilateral treaty on environmental cooperation negotiated on the context of a free trade agreement. And I must say that personally, when I've been up to Malaysia and seen the spectre of fires going on continuously in the area around Kuala Lumpur, I think it is extremely good and a step forward that this environmental aspect of this free trade agreement has been embedded in. And then, of course, there's the labour cooperation agreement negotiated in the context of the Malaysia FTA, which reaffirms commitment to the principles of the ILO Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, and follow up to the declaration. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important to point out that there will be a review. The agreement will take place within 5 years of entry into force, and at least every 3 years following that. So, Mr. Speaker, this is another excellent initiative under this forward-looking national government.